Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth annual webinar presented by Mathematic Foundation. My name is Pete Grostic, and I am the Executive Director of Mathematic Foundation. Thrilled that you're here, welcoming you tonight. Our mission at Mathematic Foundation is empowering students, teachers, and schools with resources that increase equitable access to high quality mathematics education. Tonight's topic, Thinking Classrooms for All, Motivation, Meaning, and Neurodivergence, is such an important topic as we think about creating equitable and meaningful classroom spaces for all students. Before we begin, I just have a few housekeeping notes for you. Some of you emailed me about this. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording, as well as the presenter's slide deck, will be sent to anybody who registered for the webinar by the end of this week. So check your email for that. Later on, there will be an opportunity for discussion in breakout rooms, and it will be appropriate to have your camera and microphones turned on at that time. So please prepare yourselves for that. If possible, make sure you're in a conducive space for that activity. During the presentation, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat box. So if any questions arise, please feel free to type them there, and I'll help kind of facilitate a Q&A with our presenter after her presentation. And at the very end, I'm going to give just a very brief overview of Mathematic Foundation, including a very special announcement that we are very excited about. So you won't want to miss that. But now let's get to the main reason that we're all here. We are so thrilled to have our presenter, Dwaina Sookhoo, here with us to share her knowledge and experience. So I'm going to throw it over to Mathematic Foundation Board President Luke Wilcox to introduce Dwaina. Luke.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Hi, everyone. My name is Luke Wilcox, and I'm very excited to introduce my friend, Dwaina Sookhoo. So Dwaina teaches math at the New York City Lab High School for Collaborative Studies, a public school in downtown New York City. She spent the last 11 years of her career in both middle and high school contexts, encouraging students to take ownership of their learning. Notably, Dwaina is a Math for America master teacher, a Knowles Senior Fellow, and a New York State Master Teacher. She has a master's degree in math education from the Teachers College, Columbia University, and is currently working on her EdD at Hunter College in New York City. Now, two quick personal stories that I would like to share about Dwaina. The first one goes back to 2023. Dwaina, I'm sure you remember this, when NCTM asked both you and myself to do what's called an Ignite talk. And so with an Ignite talk, it is exactly 5 minutes with 20 slides, and the slides move from one to the next every 15 seconds. So you have to be very carefully prepared for an Ignite talk. And there were about 10 of us that were giving these talks that night. And somehow Dwaina and I ended up sitting right next to each other, right near the front row in the auditorium. And naturally, both Dwaina and I were extremely nervous, and we were practicing our talk like up till the moment where we had to give the talk. And somehow, in those 20 minutes where we sat next to each other nervously, we became lifetime friends, I think, because of that shared experience there. Now, Dwaina went on to deliver an excellent Ignite talk in which she shared her story about participating in these many teacher fellowships as a Black teacher. Now, my second story is just from a few months ago. I got the chance to visit Dwaina in her classroom in New York City, downtown Manhattan. This was back in January. And I got a chance to sit in on her classes and interact with her students. And overwhelmingly, all of her students, they just love Miss Sookhoo. And so when I asked them, like, why? What is it that you love about this? One of her students said to me, well, it's because she gets us to think. And I was like, all right, that's a good thing. And in fact, that's the reason why we're here in this webinar tonight, is because we want to hear some of these ideas and strategies that you use, which is what your presentation is about. It is thinking classrooms for all, motivation, meaning, and neurodivergent. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dwaina Sookhoo.
Thank you, Luke. That was a great introduction. Hi, everyone. They promised me 100 people, and there's 260 of you. So thank you so much for showing up on a Tuesday night. I really appreciate it. I'm going to share a truncated version of a workshop that I led with Math for America. I did this work with Dr. Rhonda Bondi, who specializes in special education and specifically in thinking. She works a lot with teachers on motivation and how to get students with IEPs, neurodivergent students, et cetera, to be more engaged in the thinking and motivated in their work. So without further ado, I'm going to go through some definitions just to ground us in the language that I'm going to be using. And then, as they mentioned, give you guys a chance to talk with each other and then hopefully leave you with some tools and some ideas, whether you're in the classroom or you're working with teachers to share with them. Okay, so starting with my definition here for disability. So the dictionary definition is it's a physical, mental, cognitive, or development condition that impairs, interferes with, or limits a person's ability to engage in certain tasks or actions or participate in typical daily activities and interactions, right? And then ADA defines it as, with respect to an individual, a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more major life activities of such individual, a record of such impairment or being regarded as having such an impairment. And then from Emily Ladeau, she says it's a state of being, a natural part of the human experience. So I would love if you could share your definitions in the chat while I'm going through this of how you define disability, especially because, as you can see, these are two official definitions that talk more about what they can't do, and then one definition that talks about just like being disabled is a part of everyday life, and everyone might even experience their own versions of disabilities. And so not to kind of box us in when we use that language, okay? And then neurodivergent. So disability is a condition of the body or mind, right? We just mentioned that that's an impairment that makes it more difficult for a person with that condition to do certain activities, i.e. like a limitation of the activity and also how they interact with the world around them. So like how they are restricted from participating. So then neurodiversity is used to describe the conditions related to cognitive abilities and how it applies to conditions autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, et cetera, all these things that hopefully we've all heard of and maybe had experience with students. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, right? And I feel like neurodiversity has become another one of those buzzwords that obviously has existed for a very long time, but now there's a lot more maybe diagnoses of these, a lot more learning happening around neurodiversity, a lot of more discoveries of what that really includes, and a lot of people who feel like neurodiversity is actually the norm and that everyone probably experiences some form of neurodiversity that might not be diagnosed, but definitely changes how they participate in activities, how they think, how they learn, etc. And I love these definitions that are coming in the chat of disability, right? A different way of learning, loss of access to success in the usual way, so you need a different path to find success. Or I love this one, a mismatch between a person and an environment, right? And changing the language from disability to being different ability. So keeping these definitions in mind, like our understanding of how disability might come up, neurodivergence might come up, I wanted to go into motivation, right? Because regardless of maybe your student's diagnoses, their IEP, of their needs, or differentiation you might need to provide, you want to think about how am I motivating my students, my learners in my space, right? Number one, motivation is changeable, right? It's not a personality trait. Your motivation to maybe wash the dishes might be lower than your motivation to go shopping, right? Altering the task or the environment can change your motivation. So depending on your own personal interests, something might motivate you higher than the other, right? When you're placed in a setting where you feel autonomous or empowered, right, some belonging and competent, you're more likely to feel intrinsically motivated, meaning that you're like just personally from yourself wanting to do the thing. And we're going to go into the autonomous, belonging, competent in a second. Competence is at the core of motivation. So when you feel like you can do the work, you're more likely to do it. Right? So in thinking about how we teach, if you give your students an opportunity to enter, then more likely they are to actually want to complete it. Students are more likely to be intrinsically motivated when they know what they know and do not know. There's a symbiotic relationship between motivation and self-regulated learning. So that really comes down to, right, like, can you identify something that you might have as a strength and something that you might need? And especially if you're thinking about collaborative environments, maybe framing it so that you have this opportunity to then share with your peers, and then you can also ask your peers to share with you, so that together you're able to fill in each other's gaps, right? But knowing what you need to know and knowing what you don't know is a great way of kind of setting the stage for being motivated to actually do the work. And then finally, sometimes it's not enough to feel like you can do the work, right? You must also value it in some way. So something that interests you or something that you find useful for future goals, example, like a job or in college. I'm sure, hopefully, we've all had experiences where even if we really want to get something done, if we don't value it, it's really hard to even start. You know, we procrastinate, we push it off, we don't even do it, we avoid it, we give it to somebody else, right? But if it feels like something that's worthwhile for us or is going to add value to us, then we're more likely to actually participate in it. Okay. So in thinking about these facts about motivation, right, we're going to talk about autonomy, belonging, competence, and meaning. So this image is from Marvin and Tebi Gruska from 2018 that just kind of, I think, nicely shows how autonomy, belonging, competency, and meaningfulness all work together as driving forces for motivation and thinking about student learning. So all of these four pieces needing to work together to then create student motivation. And regardless of their quote unquote defined disability or their neurodivergence, their diagnosis around that. The idea is that if you can bring these four pieces together for a student, then they'll be motivated to do the work and therefore will be more engaged in actually doing the work. And as a math teacher, especially, if you have experience teaching math, you know that some topics kids are like, yes, I get it, this is perfect. And some they're like, absolutely not. I have no idea where to even start. But in building this routine of motivation and thinking about these four pieces, right, you can then create ways for students to have entry points where they might not know where to start, but their motivation is to know that you are going to give them a possibility of access, and possibly your other routines might give them a chance to work with their peers to collaborate meaningfully, and then, feel like they can enter within that challenge. Okay. And these slides will be shared. So I know it's a little bit small, but you will have a chance to look at these a little more deeply. Okay. So the idea is in bringing these four things together also that then that increases motivation. So if you give students autonomy, right, like they have a chance to kind of like bring their own knowledge to the table. They can kind of choose what works for them. If you allow them to feel competent, like this is something that you know how to do, or this, at least you know this piece, even if you don't know that piece, right? The belonging and the space of like, you do belong here, you can learn, right, regardless of the topic, the challenge, etc. And then giving them meaning, right? Like we said, the last piece, like if you don't value it, then what's the point? And finding ways for students to actually value the learning that you're asking them to do. So the goal is to increase the motivation. Obviously, I'm sharing these different strategies in thinking about all students, not just our neurodivergent students or students with IEPs or different diagnoses, right? Because this definitely impacts all types of learners, and increasing the motivation across your classroom will obviously then just become an intrinsic part of the environment that you've created for them. Okay, so these components of learning on this compass, as you can see, are all different directions in which you can think about learning going. I'm sure you've heard rigor. For me personally, rigor is a trigger word because there was a point, at least in New York City public schools, where that was the only word they were using. Like, do you have rigor? Does your lesson plan show rigor? What rigor are the students like working to complete? It was just like they were just using it left and right. So rigor is, like incisive thinking, problem solving, user deeper process learning strategies in the pursuit of interest, knowledge, empathy, and equity. And then joy, which is a deep and enduring sense of well-being experienced in the pursuit of rich, intersectional, historical, sociocultural, and academic identities, interests, knowledge, empathy, and equity. Freedom, the empowered self-discovery criticality and the pursuit of interest, knowledge, empathy, and equity. And then love, which is our nurturing, trusting relationships with oneself and others in pursuit of interest, knowledge, empathy, and equity. So in thinking of these four definitions, right, these are the four components, the different directions in which learning happens, right? Maybe the way you learn is through action. Maybe you learn through attaining knowledge. Maybe you learn through feeling. Maybe you learn through regulation. And how you learn, right? And being able to acknowledge your components of learning, like which directions that you might take, then can impact, obviously, how you then teach others to learn. And having yourself do the exercise of maybe like, where do I fall on the compass for certain types of learning versus others is also a great way to have your students communicate that, right? Like, am I someone who like learns somewhere in between knowledge and action? So then rigor works for me. Or do I need freedom because I like the regulation and knowledge piece? Or do I like really learn through love? Right? I need that trusting relationship with myself and with others to know that learning can happen and that I feel safe doing so. Or do I learn through joy, right? Of like the opportunity to explore, the opportunity to like use my interests, to like bring myself into learning and also bring others in. So in thinking of that compass, right, you might want to have an opportunity for yourself, but also your students to identify like where they are at different parts of learning so that you're able to like stop and reflect like, okay, you're feeling joy right now, which is, we want that, but I also want you to, can you lean towards more of the rigor piece and kind of like guiding through the compass. Okay. So this is just an example from my classroom. We used Post-it notes, and I had these 4 different compass directions across the room. And then before they even got up, I asked them just based on the colors. I made them use blue for challenge, green for freedom, pink for love, and orange for joy, to write different examples of how they see these in their classrooms and how then they can kind of impact community agreements. So the idea here was like, okay, challenge looks like this, freedom might look like this, love might look like this, joy might look like this, right? So after sorting those all, we used those different Post-its we shared, we had them do a gallery walk and decided on the ones that we wanted to incorporate in our community agreements for our classroom that kind of touched on each of the different directions of the compass. These are not supposed to be opposites. They're just more of like leanings, like depending on your learning style, right? Like which direction are you leaning in? Or depending on the kind of learning you're being asked to do, which direction are you leaning in? The kind of thinking you're being asked to do. And obviously, in some cases, some people only really lean in one direction. It doesn't mean that you can't have the other components, but you're just like leaning towards something more than other things. The idea is to bring these 4 together, right? And when you make your community agreements, when I use this activity, it was like, okay, how do we want to see all 4 of these at play when we're learning in this classroom? So I hope that helps explain that. Okay, so now we're going to transition. So we talked about motivation, right? We talked about learning styles and thinking about the components of learning. So now we're going to transition into thinking. So these are the 7 types of thinking that we adapted from the research, which I've included all citations on these slides also if you'd like to do some more personal digging. But these 7 types of thinking are like the buckets, if you think about them, of different ways in which thinking happens. Maybe you're curious, maybe you're intellectually careful, reflective, strategic, creative, adventurous, collaborative, right? And again, it's not like a one size fits all. You can only be a creative thinker. But in thinking of the types of thinking that are happening and maybe identifying like where your thinking happens the most versus places where you might feel like you want to grow that type of thinking, like, oh, I want to be more strategic, or I'd love to be more creative, right? Because right now I'm just really reflective about, like that's how I think, or I love to be collaborative, but maybe being intellectually careful would also be something that I'd like to explore as well. So I'm not going to go through all of these very specifically, but in naming these types of thinking, again, doing your own kind of reflection and then even bringing this into your classroom of like the types of thinking that are happening, having students identify the types of thinking that are happening during a certain activity, during a project, after a unit of like, okay, like where do you think your types of thinking happen the most and what might you want to work on in our next unit, right? All of this is to get students to verbalize. And when you have students who are neurodivergent, who have different diagnoses that makes thinking feel a little different for them, like this is a great way of grounding them and hopefully being able to get them to name and be more cognizant of the types of thinking that they're doing, right? I find that an easy way to get, or an easier way, because I have high school students, so nothing's easy, but an easier way to motivate my students, especially in Algebra 2, where the topics are all over the place and some of them are very challenging, is just naming what we're doing and having students buy into the types of thinking that they're doing. So I'll be like, okay, today we're doing something that might feel a little bit more creative. Like if you struggle with that type of thinking, try to identify ways that you might be able to contribute to being creative, right? Or today's going to feel a bit more reflective, and giving out this list of like, okay, so are any of these options from this list something that you feel like you can do? Can you evaluate? Can you identify patterns? Can you consider relationships? And getting students to then feel like, okay, from this I see things that feel familiar. I'm going to try to focus on this thing because I know I can be good at it, versus other things that I might not be as comfortable with. I work in a school that has an ASD Nest program, so we have students diagnosed with autism specifically. So I teach students who have autism diagnoses, and I find very often that being able to name the why and the types of thinking that I'm asking them to do, and like all the different pieces that are going in, really helps them, because it helps them process, and it kind of takes the onus away also of like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? And like that feeling of not knowing and not like really being able to figure out where to start. Okay, so now I'm sure at least some, if not most of you, are familiar with building thinking classrooms. So to tying this all in, the graphic on the right is directly from the book. Those are the components that they list of the thinking classroom. I found this more illustrative way of thinking about all those different processes, including all the different steps that he talks about to make a classroom into a thinking classroom. So in trying to emphasize and de-emphasize giving students, like, you want to give students autonomy, but also make sure that they still are learning, and thinking about these different components. What I had always kind of suggested with anyone who's like either starting out or trying to develop or get better at thinking classrooms is to pick one of these and try to really like be more cognizant of how you're giving students the opportunity to engage in it. So for example, I really, really struggle with assessment. I feel like, especially since I teach a course that ends in a standardized New York State assessment, I feel like I'm giving these students all this space to do all this wonderful thinking, and then when I assess them, I'm giving them, state exam questions, multiple choice that feels like it's taking that away from them. And so finding ways to still value the process of the thinking classroom, of like working with your peers, of asking questions, of being curious, right, of developing your own understanding, of really listening to each other and building on that, and trying to turn my assessment into something that still feels useful for preparing them for these exams, while also honoring the work that they've been doing in the space, so that they have individual success, but they also can have group success. I still feel like I'm trying to make the assessment piece better, but that's just one example this year, something that I've been working on continuously, because I feel like that's the disconnect of what I've been telling them all year versus how I assess them. So again, if this graphic helps you, I would really recommend you pick maybe just one of these areas and think, okay, I want to maybe perfect this piece. How am I honoring students' thinking in this space? What's the motivation for them? How am I like giving them an opportunity to express their learning, and also what they don't know, right? Remember, like, what they know versus what they don't know. Okay, so I've talked for a little bit, and I'd like to give you guys the opportunity to do a little thinking and talking on your own. So this is an example of a working protocol for group work that I adapted from another teacher. It's across 2 slides. So you'll see this is the second piece. It goes up to step 10. And with timing that is loose, depending on how long your periods are. But what I would love right now is for you to shift into breakout rooms and have the opportunity to look at this protocol with your group. And then at the end, think about these reflection pieces, right? There's some data in here, and there's also their student scores changing after the protocol. Thinking about what would you need to know to advise these teachers on next steps to support students who are not passing, and what can you learn from your own setting from this case study, right? So using the we need the slides. Okay, so using that protocol of thinking and discussion, and then thinking about how you might adapt this or what your next steps should be. Okay, so we're gonna give you about, I say, like 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and then we'll come back and do a little share up.
Okay, so Dwaina, I am creating the breakout rooms right now.
Okay.
I want to give everybody an opportunity to go to the chat and click the link that I just shared. It's a bit.ly that you can click on, or you can type in if need be, or copy and paste. bit.ly /MMF25 breakout, all capitals, because you will need that information for the breakouts. Dwaina just went over those slides. And maybe Dwaina, just to buy everybody a little bit more time, maybe if you could just recap the prompt for them, and then we'll be ready to open up the rooms.
Absolutely. So the prompt is to go through this working protocol for group work, reading through each step and the timing and thinking about, okay, like why would this need 10 versus 5? Why do we go back at this space? The synthesis piece, go through the whole protocol, and then look at the percent correct on 4-unit test by student. This is some data from the classroom, and then also the changes in student scores as they go from unit 1 to unit 4. And then I'd like you in your rooms to discuss kind of like next steps to advise the teacher, and also some ways in which this might inform your own teaching in your own setting. There's also some questions about, your own thinking, if you have some time you would like to look at. And there's also opportunities for you to reflect on a lesson that you taught or observed. So I don't think we get to everything, but I just wanted to frame some opportunities for extra conversation if there needs to be. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Dwaina. So I'm going to open up the rooms now, and we will see you back in the main room in about 6 minutes.
Are we in a new breakout room for discussion? Is that what this is?
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
this is weird. Okay.
Oh, yeah, it is a new group.
We
That's
got
sorry,
popped
I thought
into
we were
a
all
new
back in the
breakout
big
room?
group.
I think everyone's here.
This
Yeah,
looks
but
like
It
our
must have
group's
everybody.
changed.
I was gonna say
Okay.
I can't see everyone, but some of the voices sound familiar from my last group. Is that accurate?
Yeah, what? Okay.
No.
I thought we were being sent back to the main group.
This
I
should
did
be
too.
group.
Agreed.
I think this is the main group.
Yes, right? We're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, this is Luke here, and I do think we are all back in the main group here.
Yeah. Yes.
I see Dwaina here, so I'm going to pass it back over to you, Dwaina.
Okay.
I think you're muted, Dwaina.
Yes, I
there
got
you go.
moved by the host. Okay, great. So I know this is not enough time. If anybody could share something that they're thinking about or something that they didn't get a chance to talk about in the chat, I would love to see what you were thinking about. I know, like I said, there's a lot of information here that you weren't probably able to go through as thoroughly as I would have liked. But for time constraints, we weren't able to get through everything. I, especially if you didn't get a chance, recommend that you do this exercise of like your own thinking and like kind of pick a prompt or two just to familiarize yourself with like how you process and how you think, because obviously like the teacher's own learning styles and thinking styles then impact how they teach their students. And then again, if you didn't get a chance, also using this tool as ways of like, you know, reflecting on the lessons that you're teaching and if you're giving students time for thinking. That was the goal of the algebra discourse, was to show you how you can have different kinds of thinking happening throughout the same lesson. Okay, so continuing now, this is a great template for thinking about what you're teaching this week or soon. So like picking one of these couple sets of days, either, you know, the rest of this week or maybe next week. And then identifying like, what's your topic, what's your goal, some activities as a way to then organize and really process, okay, like where are the students going to be doing the thinking? And like what kind of thinking am I expecting them to come up with as a product of that time? And then again, right, so like some of my students need this kind of differentiation to do this thinking, or where's the motivation going to be coming in for this? So I really like this as like a good start to sketch out my ideas and then identify, okay, like this is the think time that's going to be happening. And I see a lot of good ideas are being shared in the chat, so I'm really glad that that's happening as well. Okay, and then we mentioned again, always going back to then with your template, like what kinds of thinking will your student be doing? So once you've kind of framed out your topics and your activities, then yourself, what you expect to see as the kind of thinking that students will be doing. Is activity leaning towards strategic? Is it leaning towards reflective, etc.? So that you can identify those key pieces so that when you're presenting them with the activity or the lesson design, right, you already kind of have an idea of where it's going for them. Obviously, things come up. Kids do things in ways that you never expect. But it's nice to have like a frame of reference for how you're planning on moving forward. Okay, so now this is another graphic that I really love, the idea of extending learning through thinking. These are little sentence stems or little prompts that teachers can use as you're working with students. And like the basket is the thinking that you want to happen, right? High impact, metacognition, high transfer. The apples are the different, like, again, like those buckets, right? Generalization, transfer, learning, metacognition. And then all around are the different, basically different ways that you can prompt these kinds of thinking, right? How has your thinking changed? What have you done before that looks similar to this task? What are you taking away from this experience, right? So in using these sentence stems, you're like trying to get them to then be reflective of the thinking that they're doing, the learning that they're doing, the transferring that they're doing. And I just have a few definitions in case you need just to kind of ground yourself in those. So generalization is like the using past learning to engage in current situation. The transfer is applying learning over time to different contexts. Especially in math, right? We want to keep them transferring knowledge, and metacognition is the awareness of one's own thought process, right? So, and also naming that, you know, you're being aware of the thinking that you're doing in the hopes that then as a result, you can apply those skills, you know, in other ways. Okay. So now this is another really nice tool that I like. I put like some bare bones examples, but I like to name like the thinking products as well that I'm looking for from students. So how do I know if they're being curious? They're asking me questions. If they're being reflective, they're completing reflections, right? They're being creative, they're drawing a sketch, they're making a graph, they're writing an equation. You know, if they're being intellectually careful, they're like coming up with arguments, answers, explanations. Strategic, they're planning out their work. And adventurous is giving different perspectives. Obviously, there's a plethora of other options for each of these. But this is something just like if you want to kind of get started, or if you have a department meeting or an opportunity to work with other colleagues, just to like kind of name like what are the products we hope to see, and then even identifying certain students of like, okay, this student really benefits from opportunities to be creative. So I'm going to make sure that the task always includes some kind of option for them to be able to express that creativity. Or I know this student, based on their IEP, maybe based on their learning needs, really needs to be strategic and needs to plan. So I'm going to make sure that I include that as an option for them. And in those ways, that's a nice way of differentiating so that students, again, can still access the material in different ways. And then you're keeping them motivated to do the learning because they feel like they have something that they can contribute. Okay, so I feel like we've been doing some in the chat already, but I would, just take like, I don't know, 60 seconds thinking about what you can use from this webinar to nurture your students' thinking. And then I'm going to ask that you come up with one word to synthesize that. And hold on to that because I'm going to ask at a certain point for you all to share that word. If you haven't had a chance also to look at some of the conversation pieces that came out of the breakout rooms in the chat, a lot of these are really interesting, including thinking about independent work and then shifting that so that there's more opportunities for that. And then thinking about like the working phase, the help phase, and then working phase again, right? Like, does that work for my students, or should I be giving them more time in one space versus the other? Lots of different takeaways from this. And like I said, if you have time later to look at these in more depth, you can obviously please feel free to do so. Okay. So I would love to see if you have a chance in the chat, please, to share your one-word takeaway. Okay, see nurturing, labeling, organize, naming, questioning, engagement, sharing, opportunity, awareness. Okay, protocol, autonomy. These are great. Flexibility, respect, motivation, strategies, chances, helpfulness. Okay, trying. I love trying. A lot of motivation, intentionality, inclusion, interaction, ownership, joy. Well, these are wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Please keep those coming. I would like to wrap up by showing you a few resources. I don't have the time to go through each of these individually. And again, you can always look through them or reach out to me. I put my Twitter handle on the first slide. But and these are obviously a little bit more math leaning, but these are different scaffolds, supports, extensions that you can offer students, writing supports, mnemonic devices, graphic organizers, different tools that they can have access to. This is more of like the types of thinking that you might want to offer students, or skills that you might want to give time at some point in your year to address. I do a lot of pattern recognition when I start my year because I feel like that's a big piece of Algebra 2. And then transferring those into what those products could look like. So I have an example for what algorithmic thinking could look like. And then this is an for depending on the kind of learners you have, a nice way of setting up your paper and using that every single day. This is obviously just one example. I use a different note template that I use it on my slides every single day. Like from September to May, my starter slide is always today's paper in your notebook should look like this. Just to like keep that routine so that students know what I expect their notes to look like. And also when you kind of ease up the tension of like, how should I be organized? It then lets them actually like focus on what you're asking them to do. And then here's another like nice little tool for your planning that we adapted, of like giving students an opportunity to think about like when they're reading. So like underlining and then choosing a thing that you underlined, and does the variable stay the same, right? Then you're constant. If not, right, independent, dependent. This is for science. So that, you know, like you're kind of like different processes for students thinking through. I also, even though I teach high school, I still have to reference this a few times because, you know, things get hard. So you can always post this up in your classroom somewhere if it helps for your students, as a way to like remind them that, you know, sometimes you need to take a break. You have big emotions. Okay, so that's everything that I have for you guys for tonight. Thank you so much for your participation. Any questions that you might have, etc. I believe we have a little bit of time for questions. Is that true?
We do, Dwaina. Yeah, thank you, Dwaina. There were a couple questions that came up in the chat that I'd like to kind of start with, but as we're posing those to Dwaina, if you have more questions, please go ahead and type them and stay on the line, as they say, because there's still a special announcement for Mathematic Foundation coming as well. So, yeah, Dwaina, you talked about this quite a bit, and I think it resonated with many of us, the idea of naming the types of thinking, which is such a really neat idea. And wondering if you could talk about some of the impact you've seen on your students in doing that, since you've tried that and many of us have not yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So I start off the school year trying to get them to do it, and it's something that they're not really ever asked. So they're like, I don't know, I don't know. And at this point in the year, we're almost done and they're able to do it much more seamlessly. But as a result, I've seen a lot of students get started way faster because they're like, okay, my thinking area is this, or I know I'm being asked to do this, or this is where I am on the compass. And they actually ask each other, like, okay, what's the thing that you feel strong about today? And it's really cute to see like 10th and 11th graders ask that, because then as a result, they're like, okay, great, I'm going to take this piece, you take this piece. And then we'll just like compare or check or work together. Everything I do is in groups. I change their groups every week, so they're working with new people. But that routine is still built in so that when they're like naming their thinking, it kind of also just like gives everybody something that they feel really good about. Like, okay, like today I'm going to be really good at this because this is a strength for me. And I found that my students who are more likely to say that they're not like good at math kind of stop saying that, because they're like, okay, I'm good at this thing. Like, it's not math maybe per se in the traditional sense, but I can do this. My groups are 3 to 4. I try to keep them at 3, but I have some classes where I have to have groups of 4. And like I said, I rotate very often. So my biggest class is 33 and my smallest is 26, I believe. Yeah. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, Dwaina, so earlier, right off of the breakout rooms, this came from Ashley. Their group was wondering about incorporating more independent work time in the protocol. Wondering if you could speak to that.
Yes. So I actually do not. The only independent work time I really have, and it's not even independent, is at the beginning, their warm up. But I never let them not speak to each other, because I really do value the collaboration in the classroom. And I feel like it takes a lot of onus off students who would just sit there and do nothing. Because when you can ask someone like, how do I do this? Or like ask for help, like then the buy-in is just so much stronger. If it is nice though at the end to kind of give them some kids need the independent think time at the end of class. So I do always give them for their exit ticket, I start them off with 3 minutes of independence. Just like write what you know, write what you're thinking, etc. And then I always let them compare and collaborate for the last 3 minutes. So I notice, right, some kids thrive better when they can kind of like decompress on their own, and some kids are like, no, I need to talk. So I try to balance those two things.
So we've got a couple questions about random groups, changing them daily or doing that weekly, and then some clarification on the graphics from the slides as well. Okay.
The groups I had to play, I was doing them daily. I got a lot of strong feedback that it was disorganized. Students with autism, like they were like, I need to feel like I know what's going on at least a little bit. So I found, after asking them like how frequently would feel comfortable, the whole class, I asked everybody, 1 week felt like the sweet spot, because like I know I'm going to be with these people all week, and then on Monday I can change. And if I don't like my group, it's only 5 days, and if I love them, I have them for 5 days, right? It depends on what you feel like might be working for your students. Obviously, I just found that daily was too much for those students specifically. Like it was sending them into a panic.
Perfect. And then, yeah, wondering if you can quickly clarify the scores. Yeah, from Unit
So
1 to Unit 4. Can you see that question in there? Yeah.
yes. So they were decreasing, and yes, the protocol was meant to show that that was the model that had been successful. So I was in a breakout room. We talked about why like students usually come in Unit 1, feel strong for them, and then you see a drop off by Unit 4 because the material changes, they're unfamiliar. And so the protocol was the way that they were trying to address that by allowing them to kind of balance group time, help time, and individual time as a model that's been successful for students in order to keep that those scores to be more equal from start to finish.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you all help me thank Dwaina in Zoom fashion? If you can go down and find your React tool in your toolbar and give her one of those Zoom rounds of applause, that would be amazing. Thank you so much, Dwaina, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us tonight.
Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it. Oh, this was awesome. Thank you. Yeah, please send me a message on Twitter. I'm happy to chat and talk more.
Okay. Well, everybody, I'd like to, again, this is Pete Grostic. If you joined late, I'm the Executive Director of Mathematic Foundation. Thanks again to Dwaina for facilitating this webinar for us tonight. I want to share just a brief overview of Mathematic Foundation with you. And I'm having trouble sharing my screen, so I'm just going to talk through it. So Mathematic Foundation, as I mentioned earlier, our mission is all about increasing equity in math education. That's what we're all about. We have been in operations for 3 years. We're just starting our 4th year now. We are a registered 501c3 nonprofit, which means that donations made to Mathematic Foundation are tax deductible. And if I could, I would show you our website right now. And so if you'd like to follow along, you can go to mathematicfoundation.com. Okay, or .org, either one. And that will bring up that page as we look through it. Thank you, whoever's sharing their screen there. Is that Dwaina or Luke? Yeah, thanks, Luke. Mine completely locked out on me. Thank you, Zoom. So let's go to the About page, Luke, because I'd like to showcase a bit about how we fulfill this mission of ours. First and foremost, what we do is award scholarships to students who wish to pursue math or math-related careers after high school, and also grants to teachers for math or math-related classroom resources or professional development. All of our scholarships and grants go to recipients who either are themselves or who serve low-income students or students who are traditionally underrepresented in mathematics communities. At this time, I'd like to note that I'm actually coming to you tonight from my home here in West Michigan. Mathematic Foundation does not rent a fancy office building, and that's on purpose because we are committed to keeping our overhead costs down so that donations we receive go directly to students and teachers who need them. In fact, because we work so hard to keep these costs low, we're able to promise that 100%, you can see that at the bottom there of the screen, 100% of donations from individuals like yourselves go directly to our programs and services. We're very, very proud of that. And to date, in just 3 years, we've awarded nearly $200,000 in scholarships and grants to students and teachers in need. If you go to our work webinars, Luke, we also facilitate webinars like tonight. And you'll see tonight's recording at the top of the page. You can scroll down and see some of our past webinars there as well. And we send a monthly newsletter that includes practical strategies that teachers can use to increase equity in their classrooms. These newsletters also include important announcements such as when scholarship and grant application windows are open, when we're holding events, and so on. By virtue of registering for this webinar, you will all receive the June newsletter. Now, if you wish to opt out of future newsletters, you can feel free to click the unsubscribe button within that newsletter. But if you want to stay on and see what we're all about, please continue to subscribe. In addition, like all nonprofits, we hold fundraising events, and our flagship event is our annual Pi Day Pi K hybrid run. Participants have the opportunity to run or walk Pi kilometers on or around Pi Day, virtually wherever they are, or at one of our many in-person locations across the country. This is kind of part fundraiser and part community event for us. We just have a ton of fun with it. And this year we had over 600 participants from across the country. Each person that registers receives a Pi Day t-shirt and a finisher's medal. And the cost is just 10 Pi dollars for adults and 5 Pi dollars for students. And you can learn more by visiting our website and the link that Luke is showing us. Okay, finally, as promised, I'd like to unveil our announcement. And Luke, I'm going to chat this to you so you can get this on your screen if you don't mind. All right. Tonight we are unveiling, sorry, Luke. Oh man, the suspense is killing you, isn't it? So tonight we are unveiling the first ever Mathematic Foundation, try it now, Luke, Summer Teacher Lab. There it is. All right. So this is in the summer of 2026. We'll be facilitating our first ever Summer Teacher Lab. This is a week-long in-person professional learning opportunity where teachers will work with actual students to build their capacity for equitable practices and hone skills for helping students improve their math identities and math problem-solving abilities. Teachers will apply for this opportunity, and if chosen, will receive stipends for their work, as well as ongoing support when they return to their classroom. And we're working to get funding so that all expenses are paid for those who participate in this event. More information about the Mathematic Foundation Summer Teacher Lab will come out this fall, so watch for it in our monthly newsletters. You can also at any point email contact@mathematicfoundation.org with any questions about Summer Teacher Lab or anything else that we've talked about tonight. All right. Thank you to Dwaina. Thank you to Luke. And thank you to all of you who attended tonight or are watching this later. We appreciate you. Best of luck on the rest of the school year. Thank you and good night.